removed, so please come back. Yes, so tell us what are the lessons learned from yesterday's case?
Ma'am, right of private defense should be proportional.
With the force used,
And ma'am,
No duty to retreat and
no
act
duty
of
to
aggression.
retreat if you are at your
ma'am,
lawfully at the place.
aggressor can't
And
take the
you
defense of
can't.
right
Aggressor will not take the
of
right to
private
private.
defense.
Okay, so what is the case we are looking at today? Which case?
And three cases are
Narayan
there.
and state of UP.
Narayan versus state of UP.
So let's begin with Deo Narayan. What are the facts in Deo Narayan?
Ma'am, some people beat up some people, and when they were going to police station to complain, they hid somewhere around the bush, and then suddenly appeared and with guns and knives and all, and killed all of them. This was the case.
No, you need more facts. What are the other facts which are
This,
essential, relevant for deciding this
ma'am,
matter?
Ma'am, Dev Narayan versus state of UP. Ma'am, this case is about ma'am land dispute. Ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
here in this case, appellant Dev Narayan, Chandradev, and Lalji, and there is a complainant party. The person name was ma'am Chandrarama. So ma'am, in this case there is a land dispute between two parties. The complaint party went to the accused party for accused party because the complaint party think that the land on which the accused accused party is growing or cultivating, that land was there, and they take possession of their land. So they went there and they just talked about it, and during the talk, that talk changed into hot debate, and their hot dialogue were exchanged between those parties, and then after the complaint party attacked on the accused the Dev Narayan and Chandradev, and
No,
they
let's be
got
clear.
injured
Let's be
in
clear.
act of
Jiten, let's all be clear on the facts. We know there's a plot of land. Two sets of parties are claiming ownership over the property. So which side was
yes,
cultivating and which side went to stop?
Ma'am, accused were
accused
cultivating
went
and complainant went.
and they are cultivate complainant went and there to stop them.
So the accused were cultivating, and the other said,
Yes,
no, this is our land, you cannot cultivate. So on this,
yes,
the jhagda happened between them.
yes, ma'am.
Then what happened?
Ma'am, then the complaint party start beating them, the accused party, and in act of self-defense, the accused party uh, uh, try to save themselves and attacked on that complaint party, and the Chandrama, the person from the uh, complaint party, got uh, dead. So
Is it relevant to mention to what were the weapons used?
yes, yes, ma'am, yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
Because
yes, ma'am.
always remember when you're
Of course,
giving a
ma'am.
narration of facts, all those facts which have been used in arguments have to be mentioned. If you do not mention, well, the whole
Yes,
thing has non-proportionality. One side has used spears, the other side has used lathi. No, one side has used lathi
that is yes.
and one side has used spears. So the whole argument is using that whether use of spears in response to use of lathis was proportionate, isn't it? So if you do not mention that in a narration of fact, then you are omitting important relevant facts. So always pay attention to what are the relevant facts, and I say it again. All those facts are relevant, which will be used in arguments or which will be used in reason given by the judge to give a reasons. So all those facts must be included in the narration of facts. So whether you remember the names or not, that's not relevant. You can always say ABC were going and CD came and did whatever. So name for our purposes. So of course, in the real court, the names are more important. That's no, you cannot punish you cannot punish Ram Narayan if the accused is Deo Narayan. So there you will need to have identities established, but for class purposes, remembering names are not necessary, but sometimes remembering the numbers will be. In this case, the charge has been, what has been the charge? 302 read with
149.
149. And you remember the previous case, the charge was on Gangaram also, 302 read with 34. So you find the distinction that if there is a charge of 149, which would mean that there were at least 5 people involved in the offense. If there are not 5 people, 149 is not attracted. But if there are anything from 2 or more, 34 may be applied. We will revert to yesterday Ramswarup's case again once we start looking at 34 liability and 149 liability. At this point of time, only because what we want to also understand is that why in yesterday's Ramswarup's case, Gangaram was acquitted of the charge of 302 read with 34. But we will find out that in the fact we have seen that he was charged with 302 read with 34 and 307, and he was acquitted of both the charges. And the Supreme Court confirmed that Gangaram cannot be held under 302 read with 34. So we need to reflect.
Ma'am, what is the difference?
That's
Ma'am, what is the difference between common intention and common object?
We will come to that. We'll come to, that's what I'm saying, that we will revisit that. At this point of just notice that in case where there were 3 people, then the charge was 34. 302 read with 34. 34 doesn't create an offense. It is an addition of joint liability, that you are responsible for the act done by the group in furtherance of the common intention. We'll come to common intention, same intention, all that categories will come to later. And in this case, the charge is 149. 149 will mean that certainly there were 5 people minimum. Less than 5 people, you cannot put 149. So in this case, 149 has been put, therefore mean that act of one has been imputed to the others also. Very brief answer to Shakib's question. You have to look at section 141. They have listed out, they have given us a list of what are the objects. If that is the purpose of the unlawful assembly of 5 or more, then it is an unlawful assembly, liability comes, even for being a part of the unlawful assembly. 149 is specifically, we cannot go further than that. So we'll return to all that subsequently. At this point of time, I just wanted to draw your attention that in both these cases, the allegation was not that each one of them had murdered. In yesterday's case, Ramswarup only had fired. He was charged with 302. Gangaram was charged with 302, read with 34. Acquitted is a different category, but the charge was that you had a common intention to kill. And the fact that he was acquitted means that in that case, it was not found that they were acting in pursuance of the common intention. It must be it must have been found by the court that Ramswarup was acting on his own. In this case, it is 149. So what is the procedural history? What did the Session Court do? What did the High Court do? And who has come in appeal to the Supreme Court?
Ma'am, in this case, the trial court acquitted the persons, Deo Narayanan and the co. But the High Court...
And why did the High Court convict?
Ma'am, according to the injuries inflicted to the complainant, that is, the injuries is very severe. The reasoning of the High Court in convicting the appellant is the complainant's party also had a serious injury, but the right of private defense arising in justifying the cause of the death.
Now tell me, the judge is using complainant party, etc. Why are we not making our life simpler to find out whether the accused is the complainant or whether the victim is the complainant?
So ma'am, I will clearly say that the spears used is it is higher than the apprehension. So the accused persons have very little injuries. The injury are not very serious. They are not very serious, but they in exercising of the right of private defense, the spears are that is very more sufficient, like that is very serious. So while according to the injuries inflicted to the other party, the High Court made that the acquittal is not fair, so they convicted the accused.
Yeah, so what is the High Court saying? That we are looking at the injuries caused by the victim side to the accused side and the injuries caused by the accused side to the victim side. So they said that the kind of injuries which were given to them, one, they were given by the lathis, and their injuries were very minimal. But the injuries they have given to the victim side are much severe. They are disproportionate, and therefore the conviction is exceeding the right of private defense. So they had a right of private defense, but they have used more force than was required in these circumstances. So against that reasoning of the court, against the conviction by the High Court, on that reasoning, the accused has come to the Supreme Court. Now, what did the Supreme Court say in response to the High Court reasoning? And we know that in the judgment, they have set aside the conviction by the High Court. But what have they said about the High Court reasoning? Yes,
Ma'am, the Supreme Court has said that the right of private defense can not be looked only in the margin of looking at the serious injuries. There are other things also in it. And if I quote verbatim, it says, to say that the appellant could only claim the right to use force after he had sustained a serious injury by an aggressive wrongful assault is a complete misunderstanding of the law embodied in the above section.
Yeah, so stop here. Yes, so here is the important explanation. The section uses the word apprehension of danger, not the actual occurrence of danger. So the Supreme Court is saying that the High Court has made a mistake in assuming that you have a right to retaliate, right to take action in order to protect yourself only after injuries have been caused to you and serious injuries have been caused to you. So that is where the court has in this case clarified one part, that this section uses apprehension of danger and therefore actual injury need not have occurred. Yes, further?
Ma'am, further, the second holding was that it cannot be measured in, as the court says, in golden scales, that how much force should be used, because these are moments where there's a lot of passion, and in these cases, a person cannot be reasonably assumed to see step by step what kind of harm they might cause with a particular injury. And hence, it was said that the severity... Yes, ma'am. So it was said that there should be a little leeway in looking at the right of private defense and how it had been exercised.
Yeah. So when they say golden scale, you know that when you weigh gold, it has to be very, very accurate. The judge says that in the heat of moment, on the spur of the moment when things are happening, people are not saying, okay, because the High Court seemed to have expected that if one party is using lathi, you can use only lathi. If they've given you minor injuries, you can give only minor injuries. So that's why the judge says, no, that is not how we determine the liability for private defense. In that moment, on the spur of the moment, we cannot look back and weigh the action taken with a cool mind, because at that point of time, decisions are not being taken in a cool mind. So when it is not taken in a cool mind, and you cannot apply that standard to determine what would have been the proportionality. So the principle of proportionality, because yesterday we had this discussion that if somebody is using one kind of a thing, can you use more force? So what we have here is a principle, and certain application of facts in different circumstances may vary. So and the judges do say in this case also that sometimes with a lathi you can give very fatal blows. With a spear, you might give only a scratch. So it's not just the nature of this weapon use. It is the whole circumstances which have to be taken note of in determining whether it was exceeding whether more force has been used or not. So the principle we get from this case is two principles. One, that you don't have to wait till the time actual attack happens. As long as there is apprehension of imminent attack, imminent danger, you have a right. And then proportionate is to be determined. Okay, let me say. So the second one is that you do not weigh the reaction of the parties in golden scales. So here is asking, isn't it like that one who provokes cannot claim innocence on ground of use of the disproportionate force in self-defense? Now, in this case, why is this not a case of sudden fight? Because when you talk about that, who is the person giving the first blow? In sudden fight, we do not worry about that category. So in private defense, who gave the first blow? Is it of any relevance?
Ma'am, I think the apprehension is more relevant than who gave the first blow.
Yeah, so if I'm apprehending and I take a preventive action, I'm very well justified. So it cannot be said that because I took the first blow, therefore I was the aggressor. If I'm the one who is protecting my property and the other has come determined to deprive me of my property by force, so the accused party was plowing, or was once again, who was plowing? The victim's party was plowing or the accused party was plowing? Victim's party was plowing. And who was carrying who had come with the bhalas?
Accused one.
Yes. Accused.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, they came with the lathis, if I'm not wrong.
The complainants come with the lathis and
Complainant party.
No. Don't confuse between complainants. I'm asking you to use the term accused and victim. The one who died is referred to as the victim's party, and the one who is being prosecuted is referred as the accused party.
Ma'am, victims used the lathi and accused.
Accused party was
Accused is used the spear.
Certainly, accused is used the spear. That is where the whole question had arisen, whether they have used more force. But whether the accused party were the one who was plowing, or whether the victim party was
victim party.
Victim party was
victim were plowing, and these people came to stop them from plowing. And there is an agreed statement that there is a dispute between the two as to who is the rightful owner entitled to plow. So the High Court said that they had come prepared to stop them from blowing at any cost. So they had come with that intention. Then how is it that they have still been held to be acting in private defense?
Ma'am, because there was no intention to cause such a bodily injury. It was only to stop that person. And then when the altercation grew, it was then when the spear was used.
No, so yes, Shakib?
Ma'am, because I think because according to them, it is their property and they are protecting their property, and protecting a property is it's like an excuse to for self-defense. So I think
it's not an excuse. No, it's not an excuse.
It is their property.
You have a right. You have a right to defend your property. So what the judge has agreed upon is that the victim's party had come on the property, which was a disputed property, and were trying to claim possession of that property, claim ownership of the property. So if there is a pending dispute, neither of the two parties should have used that property. So they had come prepared to ensure that no plowing takes place. And it is in that scenario that they have come prepared to stop it at any cost. So that means that it was not a case of sudden fight. They were sure that things may happen and they will do whatever is required to defend their property. Or not necessarily defend the property, but to prevent the victim side from plowing the land. And in that scenario, when the plowing party, the victim's party, created an apprehension of injury, that they actually caused some injuries, then they have gone ahead and used their spears. So in that, and that's why there's this whole detail about who made the report, where, etc., distance and blah, 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 but that's not very relevant part of it. For our learning, what is important here is that the two principles will be set. So these are the facts we have to relate to then say that in these circumstances, when the actual force used was more than what the victim side has done, so they're saying that we have to determine by reference to the overall circumstance and not only by reference to what are the weapons used? Just 1 second. There's somebody. Sorry about that. Okay.
Ma'am, is it a necessary criterion that there should be no premeditation that an event might take place? Like maybe people come with lathis and all, and if you prepare to like deal with them, does it not fall under private defense?
No, somebody has entered your, suppose your house, somebody has broken open the lock and has entered your house. We look prepared to take possession if you had no chance to take recourse to public authority at that time. So when they went, did they know that they were already there, or we did not have that information, that they were already knowing that these people were on the field. So once they do not know that, they were apprehending all that. And the discussion here is not that they were aware that they were intruders on the land, on the disputed property. They might have. So what are the facts? Let's look at the facts. Statement of facts in the case. So it's here. It appears that there was some dispute with respect to the possession of certain plot of land in this village. There were several legal proceedings between the parties, rival parties, with respect to both title and possession. On the date of the incident, there was a clash between the party of the accused and party of the complainant. Both sides lodged reports. The appellant Deo Narayan, along with Chandradeo and Lalji, one of the two accused persons acquitted by the High Trial Court, whose acquittal was confirmed by High Court, went to the police station and made a report against the complainant party. About the occurrence about 5:45 p.m., but as the SHO had already received information from Chowkidar by the other side, on behalf of the complainant's party, had lodged the report, and they arrested, exhaustive discussing the evidence produced. So when Deo Narayan and party went to file the complaint, they themselves were arrested. Produced by the prosecution and defense came to the conclusion that the possession of the disputed land was undoubtedly with the accused persons. So this is the relevant, important fact, that even though ownership, because we have this position of law, that the one who has got possession of the property has got 9 points out of 10 in ownership. So there is a dispute both about that if it is not the owner, you cannot have the possession, but what has been proved what has been accepted to have been proved is that the accused party were the possessor. So therefore, when the victim's party came on the land, they were aggressors on that land. The only further question which required determination by the trial court was if the complainant's party had gone to the plot in question. So a complainant party is the victim party, the one who has lost somebody, with an aggressive design to had gone to the plot in question with an aggressive design to disturb the possession of the accused person by unlawful use of force, and if the accused person had exceeded the right of private defense in beating and killing Chandrama and causing injuries to the other members of the complainant's party. According to the trial court, the complainant's party had actually gone to the plot in question for the purpose of preventing the accused persons from cultivating and plowing. So the victim party had gone there to prevent the group which had the possession. After considering the evidence on the record, the trial court felt great difficulty in agreeing with either of the two rival versions given by the prosecution and defense about the manner in which the markbeat had taken place. The learned session judge, however, considered himself to be on firm ground in holding that the injuries suffered by Chandradeo and Deonarayan rendered it difficult to believe that they had inflicted injuries with their spears on Bans Narayan and others. In his opinion, the accused person had been if he had been the aggressor, they would not have sustained from causing injury to Raj Narayan, who was actually plowing the field. In view of this improbability, the learned session judge did not find it easy to place reliance on the statement by the prosecution witness. Again, after examining the injuries sustained by the members of both parties, the learned session judge felt that Deonarayan and Chandradeo must have received injuries on their heads before they inflicted injuries on the members of the complainant's party. On this view, the accused were held entitled to exercise the right to private defense and to inflict injuries in question. So in this case, what the session court determined was categorically that first the victim side came and tried to take forcible possession of the land. Then they decided they were clear that they will prevent the accused party to cultivate that land. And they were the ones who have also given the injuries to these persons. But the High Court said that, upheld the conclusion that on the basis of this conclusion, the accused were acquitted. On appeal by the state, High Court upheld the conclusion of the trial court that the accused person had the right of private defense, but they had exceeded the right of private defense. So there is a concurrent finding of two courts on questions of fact that victim's party was the one who was forcibly taking possession of the land. They were ready to, and they had used force in order to prevent the accused party from cultivating. So on that, the High Court and the Session Court are in agreement. What are they differing in is the session judge thought that these circumstances, they were justified in using force to protect themselves. The High Court said, yes, they had a right of private defense. And so again, there is both the parties are agreeing, both the courts are agreeing, both the Session Court and the High Court are agreeing that they have a right to private defense. The session said they had used force in the circumstances, it was justified for them to use. The High Court has said that no, even though they had the right to use force, but not as much force as they've used. So that is the only difference in the two, and that is why the final order is differing. So by the High Court order, what are they now convicted for? Which section? IPC?
I'm 304.
304 because of the exception. With exception of section 300.
Exceeding right to private defense.
Exception 2, exceeding the right to private defense. So And that's where we understand that if it is an exception which applies, then conviction still happens. If the exception of the 300 applying. If the exception under chapter 4 are applying, then complete acquittal. So in the lower court, they got acquittal. In the high court, they got conviction by reference to exception 2 of section 300 and therefore conviction under 304. So in that context, when the Supreme Court is railing, so the Supreme Court is saying reasoning of the High Court in convicting the appellant broadly stated seems to be that it was only if the complainant party had actually inflicted a serious injury on the accused that the right to defend could have arisen to cause death. In the present case, as only 2 members of the party of the accused, namely Chandradev and Devanarayan, had received injuries, which though on the head were not serious, they were not justifying in using their spears. On this reasoning, they said they have exceeded the right of private defense. So this is what the Supreme Court has clarified. And in the para which is beginning, in our opinion, the High Court seems to have erred in law in convicting the appellant on the ground that he had exceeded the right to private defense. And this whole para explains to us 102, which we did not read, but now we can understand from here. Maybe we should actually read section 102. Open your RBCs. Take out section 102. 102, commencement and continuation of the right to private defense. This is it. Right to private defense commences as soon as reasonable apprehension of danger to the body arises from an attempt or threat. So attempt means that actual or even a threat is used. So it means that if there's a threat, it is available. And this is what the judges have said. According to that section, the right to private defense of the body commences as soon as a reasonable apprehension of danger to the body arises from an attempt or threat to commit the offense, though the offense may not have been committed, and such right continues so long as such apprehension of danger to the body continues. The threat, however, must reasonably give rise to present and imminent and not remote or distant danger. This right rests on the general principle that where a crime is endeavored to be committed by force, it is lawful to repel that force in self-defense. To say that the appellant could only claim the right to use force after he has sustained a serious injury by an aggressive wrongful assault is a complete misunderstanding of the law embodied in the above section. The right to private defense is available for protection against apprehended unlawful aggression and not for punishing the aggressor for the offense committed by him. It is a preventive and not punitive right. The right to punish for the commission of offense rests in the state, which has a duty to maintain law and order, and not in private individuals. If after sustaining a serious injury, there is no apprehension of further danger to the body, then obviously the right of private defense would not be available. So the example I was giving earlier, that you threw something at the intruder and he fainted. So even though he might have, suppose this person came upon you and is about to cause grievous injury to you, you pick up a knife and give it a blow to him and he faints. So even though you have suffered a serious injury, at this point of time when he has stopped being a danger, your right has come to an end. In our view, therefore, as soon as the appellant reasonably apprehended danger to his body, even from a real threat on the part of the party of the complainants to assault him for the purpose of forcibly taking possession of the plot in dispute or obstructing their cultivation, he got the right of private defense and to use adequate force against the wrongful aggressor in exercise of that right. The complainants, which is the victim party, were clearly determined to use maximum force to achieve their end. He was thus fully justified in using force to defend himself and, if necessary, also his companions against the apprehended danger which was manifestly imminent. The approach of the High Court that merely because the complainant party had used lathis, the appellant were not justified in using his spear is no less misconceived and insupportable. During the course of Marpeet, like the present, use of a lathi on the head may very well give rise to a reasonable apprehension that death or grievous hurt would result from an injury caused thereby. So what does this imply? About section 100 now. So they're not referred here, but under section, they've referred it later. But that is an assault giving reasonable cause for death or grievous hurt will be the consequence. If somebody has been given a blow on the head with a lathi, this blow may not have resulted in grievous injury, but the next blow may. So therefore, it cannot be laid down as a general rule that use of lathi as distinguished from use of spear must always be held to result only in a minor injury. Much depends on the nature of the lathi, the part of the body aimed at, and the force used in giving the blow. Indeed, even a spear is capable of being so used so as to cause a very minor injury. So this is what they're explaining. And we need to remember what two things we have learned in this one: reasonable apprehension and proportionality, not determined by actual what has been used, but not weighing it by golden scales. Can we very quickly look at the last one, the third? No, the second case. We don't do three, but we've done just in one. What is the second case about?
It is Kishan Lal versus
State of MP.
Yeah, what are the facts?
Kishan versus State of
Kishan
MP.
versus State of MP. What is the key point involved in this case? Remember, all these cases are this neighborhood disputes we keep hearing about.
The appellant was making some foundation or something, and then the victim came and said to him, another person came and said to him that why are you doing this over here? I told that it is his brick and his land, so he will do whatever he wants. And there was exchange of hot words, and then the other person left saying that he will pay for it, and then brought his brothers with weapons and attacked Bucha, and Bucha found a weapon nearby. I don't remember the name exactly, and started hitting
Kutai, ma'am.
Yeah, Kutai.
Yeah,
I don't know what is Kutai, but yeah.
Started hitting the other person, and a person fainted, and they hit Bucha with the same weapon till he died. So that was the case.
Yeah, so what is the sequence of events? First, we had Bucha being told not to use, and he said, this is my bricks only, isn't that? He was supervising. Bucha was supervising foundation digging near his house. And Damrulal told him not to do this. He said, I'm using my own bricks. Then Damrulal and others go back to Bucha's house. Bucha is having meals at that point of time inside his house. Then they drag out Bucha, and they try to up to a tree, nearby neem tree. There he was given a beating by fists and kicks by the appellant and his three brothers. Bucha contrived to extricate himself from their grip and picked up a khutai lying nearby. When he picked up the khutai, these people got more angry. He gave 3 blows on the head of Harcharan with the khutai. Harcharan fell down on the ground and became unconscious. So the party which has come to attack Bucha now is in a difficult scenario because one of them fellows have fallen down also by the force used by Bucha. There he was given. Thereafter, the appellant and his remaining 2 brothers caught hold of Bucha. Appellant snatched the kotai from the hand of Bucha and gave 2 or 3 blows on his head. Bucha fell down on the ground and became unconscious. Appellant carried away Harcharan, who had already fallen down, lodged a police report about the incident. Bucha died thereafter. So on these facts, we need to determine whether the accused are entitled to the defense of private defense. What do the other think? Now, the whole thing will be dependent on who is the aggressor in this case and who is the victim in this case.
Ma'am, the appellant and his brothers are the aggressor.
He died.
Yeah, they came back. They started the attack. When Bucha became more powerful with the Khotai having got hold of the Khotai, then the argument of their argument was, then we were defending ourselves. And this is the ruling in this judgment, that you cannot, this is not a right of avenging, of taking retaliation. It's a right of private defense. And in this case, the aggressor cannot claim the right to private defense. The party which has been accused is actually the aggressors. They went back. Bucha was on his house. He has not done anything. When Bucha was acting, he was acting in private defense. And where was the place where we read? There is no right of private defense against private defense. Did we read any provision in the sections we read? Anyone? Did you see any section, any part?
99.
Where was it?
Ma'am, 99, section 99.
Yeah, this way which part of 99?
Ma'am, I have a question.
पहले मेरे सवाल का तो जवाब दो, तब अपना सवाल पूछना.
Ma'am, section 99, right against which there is no right of private defense.
कहाँ लिखा है?
Ma'am, section 99 of IPC.
नहीं, ये कहाँ लिखा है कि there is no right of private defense against private defense? कहीं लिखा है इसमें? Is it our understanding of the law? Because when you look at this case, whether we are going to look at the whole incident, the second part of the incident, have got what the prosecution is trying, what the defense is trying to say is that there were 2 levels of activity happening. One when we attacked him, and the second when he attacked us. So when he attacked us, we were exercising our right of private defense. And he had already made the Harcharan had already become unconscious. So now we had the apprehension of death being caused to us. And therefore, what we were doing was our right of private defense. The appellant had no intention to cause grievous hurt to Bucha or to take his life. Bucha was the aggressor. The session judge considered that the appellant could be held guilty under 304 Part 2, which means that the session judge believed that they had a right of private defense, but they had exceeded their right. But as he has acted as a private defense, he was not guilty of the offense. The session judge acquitted the appellant as well as his co-accused. The state appealed. Bucha was not an aggressor, so the appellant could not claim to have beaten Bucha and his other right of private defense. The respondent had come prepared to beat the deceased, and as stated above, were the aggressors. The respondent, therefore, could not claim protection under a right to defend against Bucha, who, in exercise of the right of private defense, wielded the kutai, causing serious injuries and even death of one of the attackers. The result, High Court convicted the appellant of the offense under 302. And this is what they have come in appeal against. The counsel of the appellant has addressed on 2 points. First, he has urged that the appellant had acted in exercise of right of self-defense. Secondly, he has submitted that the appellant's act of causing injury to Bucha did not fall under Section 302, but only under 304 Part 2. We are unable to accept this argument. This is what the Supreme Court said. Turning to we are not focusing on the second one, but the first one. They said, when Harcharan and all went to the house of Bucha, pulled him out of his house up to the neem tree, and there subjected him to punching and kicking. So they were the aggressors. They took the law in their own hands. Bucha contrived to escape from their grip, caught hold of the kutai, and struck 3 blows on the head of Harcharan. Was Bucha justified in giving these 3 blows, which ultimately led to the death of one of them? Suppose if Bucha had survived this incident, could Bucha have been acquitted of causing death, or whether he would have been convicted for exceeding the right of private defense?
Acquitted.
He would have been acquitted?
Yes, ma'am. Because in that particular situation or moment, it is difficult for a party to maintain calm and to weigh that golden scale principle came into existence.
Yeah, but will you say only golden scale, or you'll look at this? There are 3 men who are attacking one, and they are now ready to punch and kick.
Or grievous hurt.
So if the minimum he could have apprehended 3 people are beating him, certainly he can expect grievous hurt is breaking a bone. So if 3 people are beating you with kicks and punches, then apparently the reasonable apprehension would be that I am likely to suffer grievous hurt, if not death. So in that circumstance, he was justified in taking the action which Bucha did. And because Bucha was acting under private defense, certainly these people did not have that right. Turning to the second argument, had gone to the house of Bucha with the intention of causing physical injury, harm to him. So what do you think? They will be guilty of 302 or 304?
Ma'am, 304. Ma'am, reason being that they tried to inflict such injuries which might have led to the death of the person. So they
no. You're forgetting Birsa Singh. What was the intention with which they went there? Intentionally causing injury. That was the objective, the test, the subjective test, whether the injuries found on person of Kutai were they intentionally given.
It was given intentionally, and it was inflicted.
One of the skull fractures. Look at it. The blows was so severe that there was profuse bleeding inside the brain. One of the skull fractures extended from the right temporal region to the left temporal region and proceeded internally to the base of the skull. Banerjee, who did the autopsy on the dead body of Pooja, deposed with these injuries, death was inevitable. So objectively speaking, the doctor said inevitable death. They had given these injuries intentionally. Your Birsa Singh tells you 302. There's no question of applying 304. Thirdly, so the High Court is right in convicting under 302. I think we'll need to stop at this today. We are still left with one more case. So Monday. We are behind schedule now, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I had a doubt regarding today's case.
Yes.
Ma'am, when we say that whenever we are convicting for murder, we should have the intention to give the bodily injury. Ma'am, if we look at this particular case, the intention to give the bodily injury that caused the death came after he was provoked because of that event. So how can we say that they could have formed an intention
No,
to
no,
give
no,
a
no, 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 no. Whether if somebody is acting in private defense, you get provoked. It's your fault or his fault? He should not defend himself.
Yes, ma'am. Agreed.
Then?
Ma'am, it is mentioned in the case mat itself that they came pre-planned to, like, Ganesh exhorted his brother.
Because what we know is that certainly they had when we agree with that argument that they had no intention to cause grievous hurt or death. We agree with that. But they had very clear intention to cause injuries. And then whether they got provoked at self-defense or something else is not material, because what Bhucha was doing was what was his rightful act. So by his doing a rightful act, you get angry. It's your problem, not Bhucha's problem. So your intention can be then from then and there. You don't have to pre-plan your intention. At that point of time, they decided to now give it to him. So they very intentionally caused all those injuries, irrespective of the consequence. And Birsa Singh clearly tells us they're not saying these were accidentally caused to him. They intentionally gave him, and they were saying we were acting in private defense. So they are not saying that these were accidentally given or by mistake they were given. They intentionally gave those injuries in circumstances where they had no right of private defense.
And the question is, was it sufficient to cause the death of the person?
The medical opinion says no, death was inevitable. The objective test, if you apply Birsa Singh steps, whether the injuries found on the person were caused by the person, by the accused person, were they intentionally given? That's the only thing we need to find out. Yes, they intentionally gave him that injury and gave those injuries to him when he had to the deceased person when they had no right of private defense. They had no justification to give any injury.
Ma'am, but will we take subjective approach to it or the objective approach? Because in the heat of the moment,
what is the heat of the moment? किस बात से उठा है? आप इसको मारने जाओ, वो आपको वापस मारे तो आप नाराज हो गए? किसकी कितनी हिम्मत हो गई हमें मार रहा है? आप पहले इंस्टेंस में मारने कैसे पहुंचे थे उसको? वो नहीं पूछते हम. उसने प्राइवेट डिफेंस में एक्शन ले लिया तो अरे इसकी इतनी हिम्मत हो गई, हमें मार रहा है.
Ma'am, should we see it as apprehension of danger and not provocation? I mean, they did not get angry that he was acting in self-defense. They were scared that they might get killed because of the action that Bhucha was taking. So apprehension.
They were responsible for that scare. They themselves were the authors of that scare. Nobody gave them. They did not come suddenly.
Ma'am, can we say that the aggressor?
When you are yourself doing an unlawful act, knowingly, intentionally in a group, how do you escape liability?
Shouldn't
we need to stop? You have a class, I have a class. We continue tomorrow. No, tomorrow is Monday. Okay, pre-warning. I'm hoping to take your classes from Monday, Tuesday, most probably Wednesday also. First Thursday, certainly not be taking a class. Next Monday, Tuesday, I will not be taking a class. I will be giving you, because I'm expecting to leave by next week. And I do hope to continue our classes, but it may not be possible for me to continue with the schedule as it is given. So I'll give you advance notices of when I can have classes. Most probably classes may be on Sunday or it may be in the late evening after 8 o'clock. I do not have very many choices in the matter. Or it may be very early morning, which I'm not very comfortable. Usually I'm a late riser, a late sleeper. So, and you don't have a choice actually. Neither I have a choice nor you have a choice to say, oh, it doesn't suit us. So you want to continue with me, it doesn't suit most of you, then you will have another teacher. If you are flexible with the timings, then we'll be able to hold our classes on a different schedule.
It's completely all right.
Yes, ma'am. We want to continue.
It's okay. No,
Yes, ma'am.
I've started the course. I would want to finish the course. So it's a question of 4 more weeks, and we'll manage. So okay, see you on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.